of it. I often find people don't always understand engagement. Engagement, by definition, is your employees' interest and involvement in helping your company be successful. You want to talk about performance, whether it's organizational performance or individual performance, remember that. How involved and how interested are your people in making you successful? It is a great indicator of how your company is going to do moving forward in the future.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the peopleHum interview series. This is your host Zia Springwaller at peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end, one-view, integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for Human Capital Management that's specifically built for crafted employee experience and the future of work. We run the peopleHum blog and channel that receives more than 400,000 visitors a year, and we also publish several interviews with well-known names globally every month. We have with us today Shane Green, founder and president of SGEi. Shane actively engages in leadership workshops, executive retreats, and orientation, as well as offboarding programs. He's a world-renowned keynote speaker, the author of Culture Hacker, and a business magnate who consults global Fortune 500 leaders on customer experience and organizational culture. He draws upon his foundation at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company and works in multiple industries to transform employees' mindset, experience, and habits to improve customer experience, employee retention, and organizational performance. With that, it is my pleasure to welcome you, Shane.
Thank you. Great introduction.
Thank you. So, just to start with, Shane, your company, SGEi, sounds very interesting. Could you tell us a little bit more about it?
Well, it's been around for just over 20 years now. And when I left Ritz-Carlton, I sort of wanted to start my own business. And I sort of had to sit back and think about, well, what is it that I actually know how to do? At the point, we'd been training and opening hotels in Asia. So it really started out as a hospitality training company. We worked with a lot of hotels, restaurants, hospitality businesses opening up. I think we've opened over 100 different hotels and restaurants. At the same time, over the years, we've really evolved in focusing just on guest journeys, but into customer journey mapping. And really, we took a sort of a strong lead in the customer experience movement, working with the NBA to help map out season ticket holder experiences, BMW to think about the sales process and journey, and a number of different organizations where we really started to actually develop strategies like we did in hospitality, which was develop great guest customer experiences. As we sort of kept developing and kept evolving as a company, we started to recognize that the key element in every customer experience strategy is the people. And yet it was one of the areas that was least being focused on. And so we started to really focus on and research culture. And probably for the last 5 years, we've spent a lot of time helping to develop employee experiences, define culture. And we've really come up with quite a very clear strategy on how to improve culture, which of course improves then customer experience. So it's been a long evolution, but a lot of what we do today is consulting with different organizations on how to get the right culture to deliver on the brand promise. In between that, we work on, and we have a whole creative team that can develop a lot of different mechanisms, media, materials to help support that. And of course, we have a large team of trainers that can actually go out and activate and implement what it is that we come up with. So it's been a fantastic journey, but it really leaves us today probably really one of the experts in the industry in how to develop and drive employee experience, elevate performance, all around the idea of making customers happy.
You know, it's so amazing to see more and more people realize the importance of, employee experience in organizations. And I think with time, it's starting to prevail, and we're starting to realize that it's so significant to, ensure the best for employees in order to drive performance. So you also focus a lot on culture. What are some important frameworks to keep in mind while setting up an organization's culture?
Yeah, so it's a really great question. So we've spent a lot of time working out what is the right strategy to build culture. And we've come up with some very simple ideas. There's 3 key things every organization needs to think about. That is moments, mechanisms, and managers. And so let me sort of explain. So a lot of our work that came from customer experience mapping, what we realized is that when you think about experience, you're not thinking about a video, but you're thinking about snapshots. Daniel Kahneman's work was really quite revolutionary in how people think about experience. And so what we understand is that when everyone says, I had an experience, it's not every second of the experience, it's key moments in it. And so what we've been looking at over the last few years is what are the key moments in an employee's experience at work? Now, these moments happen throughout the year, through the month, but even out the day. And what we've started to understand is there's about 37 key moments in an employee's journey that significantly impacts how they feel about work. For us, culture is the collective hearts and minds. It's how people feel about what they do and who they do it for. So we've really focused companies in on understanding moments. For instance, one of the most important moments in an employee's journey is their first day at work. And this is something that I certainly got from a Ritz-Carlton, but not enough organizations pay attention to first impressions, because that first day will determine the emotional connection an employee has with their company. And quite honestly, the research suggests in the first couple of days, an employee decides whether or not it's a job or it's a career. Meaning, are they going to keep looking for another job, or are they going to invest in terms of driving performance? We've also found 8 key moments each day that impacts how people feel for that day. So a lot of what we start with is that organizations need to understand the key moments that influence employee experience. Then we go, let's look at mechanisms. There's certain mechanisms that influence those moments. For instance, the orientation and onboarding. We know that within that first day or within the first 30 days, there's 4 or 5 significant moments. So what we work with organizations on is how to build the mechanisms, their orientation, their onboarding schedule, new employee surveys that will actually build and ensure the right amount of motion is occurring in those moments. And so we've developed recognition systems, recruitment programming, orientation, onboarding, communication. All of these things play a part. So we got moments plus mechanisms, and then the final one, which is the big one, managers. So what we really understand is that managers have the biggest impact on how someone feels about what they do and who they do it for. And so what we focus in is on the idea within a manager's role, how they lead their people. We think in terms of management and leadership, we think they're 2 sides of the same coin. And so when a manager, traditionally called a manager, someone with a title, they have management responsibilities and leadership responsibilities. And we've been studying a lot on what those management tasks are and what the leadership tasks are. We know that they need both. You have to be able to run an operation, which is what managers traditionally do. But we're starting to realize that leadership plays the biggest impact, of course, in culture and hearts and minds. And so we have to have balance. Too many managers aren't performing their leadership functions. So we've actually spent time identifying 5 key elements that a leader does to inspire hearts and minds, from sharing expertise, supporting with effort, demonstrating passion, setting the example, and then the big one, demonstrating care. So as I sort of said, we spent a lot of time with companies today developing their strategy around moments, mechanisms, and managers. And once we've got the strategy and understanding their weaknesses, we then go about building, developing, and refreshing all those key cultural elements. And that's what we came up with Culture Hacker. It's our ability to go in and hack mechanisms, manager habits to make sure that those key moments stand out in an employee's day.
You know, that's such a cohesive and nice way to kind of break it down with, 3 particular areas that you look at. And I think they really cover a lot of the essential areas of, organizational culture. So that's a very nice way of understanding it. So the last area you spoke about was managers, and, you went into leadership. So in today's sensitive world, retention is crucial. And how important do you think is a leader's role in changing an employee's mindset for growth? How do you handle employees that don't believe in your organization's value set?
Well, let's start back and say, here, my definition of a leader. Leader is a person who is able to inspire the hearts and minds of others to want. They inspire people to want to give their best, to perform at their best, and even do things they don't want to do. So that's why I think leadership is so critical. So think about that. A leader inspires someone to do something they might not want to do. Well, the number one thing that most human beings don't want to do is change. So that's why the leadership function is so critical in crisis and times of change. The manager is highly effective in running the operation, but if there's crisis like we're facing right now, significant changes which we're facing right now, what we need to have is managers that understand that they impact hearts and minds. They inspire people to want. And that's a critical part of this. And as I said, what we've found is these 5 really key traits that when it comes to the point of an employee doesn't want, what a manager has to think about is, well, wait up, I have a responsibility to inspire that want. And I ask a manager, and we do these great little surveys and analysis, but it basically looks at a manager in how much do they share their expertise with that employee? How much do they show passion with that employee for what they do? How much do they put time in and support them each day in the operation? How well are they doing at setting the example for company values and then demonstrate care? What we find is that employees who don't want to change, don't want to evolve, it's because of past practice. So they've been socialized into it. It's up to a manager's responsibility to inspire that want. And while for some people that may take a lot of time, what we've seen across the board and consistently is that 99.9% of human beings want to feel good. They want to know that what they do matters. And as a result, I think when we hear the excuse of the employee just doesn't want to change, I will turn that back and says that the leader hasn't inspired them enough or given them a good enough reason to change. And that's the biggest thing. I often talk with executive groups and organizations before they go down the track of building and changing or refreshing their culture. The first thing we tell them is that the most important people that have to be willing to change is the executives. Often we'll go in and they'll say, we want to change our culture, we want to improve our employee experience or our customer experience. And what they're really telling me is, I need my employees to change. What we go back and tell them is that the employees will evolve when the right mechanisms and leadership habits in the right moments connect. But that'll happen naturally. What we really need to have happen is that the senior leaders need to evolve their leadership style. The human resource team needs to be more focused on the right type of mechanisms to support the brand. And most importantly, they need to understand the key moments in an employee's day, month, and year, and of course, history of working. So probably my biggest frustration is that managers will blame employees for not wanting to change, when I'm very much more focused that good leaders inspire change just by doing those 5 things.
That's a very, very interesting perspective to look at it. And I think there's a lot of, change that is required in the way people understand organizations and culture as well. Coming to a different side of things, I'd love to know, your thoughts on how customer experience has changed over the past few years, because it has changed dramatically. And I'd love to know what you think about it.
Yeah, so I think the changes, what hasn't changed is that customers want an experience. And so I think we fundamentally go, the experience is still there. What has changed is the delivery of the experience. And of course, it's changed again with the virus and everything going on right now. What was happening was they wanted the experience on demand in their own time. They wanted the experience to be on their time, not the organization's time. So you saw a lot of shift towards technology. You saw a lot of shift towards web-based retailing. A lot of business was done like we're doing today, online or virtually. So what has to happen is it puts more pressure, and it goes back to that word change. Organizations have had to change their business model. That's happened over the years, where we've gone from a manufacturing model to a distribution model to an experience model. what we're starting to see now is almost the advent of the next change, which is, I believe, the employee experience economy, where you're starting to see employees have a huge influence on how their customers, how their businesses take care of customers, even what products they're selling and offering. So we're seeing this continual change. In terms of the customer experience, though, obviously what's happened in the last 6 months with the virus is that we're seeing a much greater focus on some of the basic human needs, which is health, safety, care. Some of the flashy elements that were often included, we've seen a big kind of regress back into fundamentally take care of the basics, keep people safe. Who would have thought that for airlines, the most important thing they should be talking about is hand sanitizer? Or that, look at a hotel, the most important people are the housekeepers. You know, before it used to be who had the best concierge in the city. Now you could start to argue who has the best housekeeping team in the city. So I love the fact that we're starting to see that evolution of what is important. But make no mistake, it still has to be experiential. I think what I'm very interested in a lot right now in the hospitality space is the evolution of travel, the evolution of how people are going to experience. And we're seeing that kind of simplicity back. The fact that we've shifted to virtual work, what we're seeing is people really starting to gravitate towards back reclaiming some of their time. I mean, you're seeing impacts of things like people not having to commute to work, which was taking hours out of their day. You're seeing people, there was a lot of argument that people are just going to do whatever they want working from home, and yet you're seeing a huge push in productivity. So I think people are going to kind of really gravitate towards those quality of life elements. We already saw our new generation, our Zs, make that a much more important, whether it's environment, whether it is, taking care of other people, greater diversity. So at the end of the day, what you're seeing is that the traditional approach to how companies were marketing, selling, and what they thought was important, I think is shifted. And I think it's a great shift. And that for all the things that seem to be going on in the world, a connection back to a simpler, safer, yet social form of life is really a foundation that the values of the customer experience maybe haven't changed, but they've become much clearer in this process. It's not about the bells and whistles and the gold trimmings. Think of that. Keep it simple, keep it safe, but keep it social. And if you can mix those, which means social and safety and simple together, you've got a really good ingredient for what the consumer is going to value in the future.
You know, you pointed out there's some things like work from home and the change, like in terms of commuting and these kind of aspects. And I think these things were never possible before. But now that we were kind of all forced out of our comfort zone, we kind of just, had to do it. And we've seen that it's something that we were very resistant towards, but kind of forced into. And there have been benefits and there have been some really positive outcomes that have come from being pushed into a zone that you're no longer comfortable in.
You know, what's interesting is that if you look at the research, up until last year, the number one benefit that was requested by employees was more flex time and more time working from home. All of a sudden now we've been forced into it, as you said, so we've actually got this positive. And what companies have realized, you know what, my people are just as productive, even more so, working from home. So let's take one plus out of 2020.
Yep. I mean, if we can find a silver lining in all of this, then I mean, that's the best we can get out of it, really. So those were some very valuable thoughts. And, lastly, I just kind of want to know, do you have any sound bites for our audience today?
Oh, there's so many. Hopefully, I've already given you a couple of good sound bites. When it comes to culture, I always say that culture is no longer an HR thing. It is a business thing. Remember that the culture of the organization requires everyone to be involved. So I think that's key. A lot of times I'm talking about, and again, I know at peopleHum, you buy into this, employee experience drives customer experience. Just keep that. EX drives CX. Keep that simple equation and you'll be focused on the right stuff. And then the other piece that I've been talking a lot about lately is the idea, everyone talks about engagement and the importance of it. I often find people don't always understand engagement. Engagement by definition is your employee's interest and involvement in helping your company be successful. You want to talk about performance, whether it's organizational performance or individual performance, remember that. How involved and how interested are your people in making you successful? It is a great indicator of how your company is going to do moving forward in the future. So a couple of good ones. Hopefully there's a few in there that people find interesting. And of course, if anything, they can always reach out and talk more. I love talking about this stuff. Hopefully you can tell.
Yeah, yeah, it's always nice to hear someone who's passionate about what they're speaking on. So, yeah, those were some very important things that you mentioned today. And I think, honestly, our audience and I personally as well really enjoyed hearing your thoughts on all these different aspects, especially all the HR related things. It's always nice to learn a little more and see new perspectives. So, thank you, Shane, for speaking with us today. It was a great conversation and I wish you and your business all the best.
Well, listen, thank you. You guys are doing some cool stuff out there. I'm excited. When we're talking mechanisms, we got to talk people hum. So again, thank you guys.